Good morning, everyone. I'm Julie Livingston here on behalf of the Quorum Initiative. We are a global group of women, of senior level women, around in three chapters: New York, Washington, D.C., and London, who convene to deepen connections with each other, to learn and to carve out a more fulfilling career path for ourselves, to increase representation of women on corporate boards and increase and attract investment in women owned and led venture companies. I'm delighted today to have a conversation with my colleague, Somi Kim. Somi is a noted design strategist who aligns business goals and human values. What she does is really fascinating. Most recently, she was Senior Director of Healthcare Solutions at Johnson & Johnson, where she championed design solutions with real-world impact for 15 years across all company sectors. Her passion for systemic change, that's our operative word, change, fuels her engagement in larger conversations about social design. Somi received a Master of Fine Arts from Cal Arts and an AB from Harvard College. She is an Aspen Institute First Movers Fellow and lives in New Jersey with her husband and son. And I had the pleasure of meeting Somi in person, finally, at the recent Quorum Initiative How Retreat in Narrowsburg, New York, where she led two reflection sessions, where we started looking back where we've been and forward where we want to be. And it really made such an impact on me. I've continued to think about it. So Somi, welcome to this conversation.
Thank you, Julie. I'm delighted to be here.
So Somi, you yourself are currently in a career transition, as many women are today, following the pandemic. How do you deal with some of the emotions that can bubble up?
That's a great question. And I think it's a day-by-day situation. I think that for me, having been with a company for so long and then experiencing the disruptions that we all have between 2020 and 2022, it was really a moment when a lot of our assumptions about what, quote unquote, the workday or what our purpose should be, those questions began to be much more intense as we look ahead. And so as I have been transitioning from Johnson & Johnson with the closure of Johnson & Johnson Design in January of this year, I've been fortunate to have been given the gift of time with a severance period to drill down and discover before rushing ahead. And for me, the emotions have a lot to do with the fact that my personal identity was so intertwined with my working identity. And it was quite destabilizing to realize that I had to separate those things and reevaluate in order to understand where I needed to best contribute moving forward.
You know, you talk about the gift of time, and I agree with you. I think that is an incredible gift. And I remember having a lot of the same feelings that you did, feeling unmoored, being in such close everyday contact with a group of people in an office for years, and then all of a sudden not. And those relationships end up changing over time, right? Some people you keep in touch with, many you don't. But the gift of time in a transition is really just that, because I think as women, we have so many other responsibilities in our lives, right? Often with caregiving, running a household, things that, women just take on most typically. And having that ability to take a breath and really look back and then start thinking about looking at, what you want next is really an incredible thing. Yes, it can be scary at times, but it is also a moment to really kind of cherish.
That's right. I think that the double whammy of experiencing a global pandemic and then beginning a transition period to look at what's next, those things have helped me understand that the structures that we surround ourselves don't necessarily have to dictate how we live. For example, a 5-day work week, a 2-day week.
Ah,
And
yeah,
I think for many of us who were fortunate enough to be able to work remotely, which was really an amazing, uh, just something that we couldn't take for granted. We didn't know what was going on in 2020. It was very scary. But for those of us who were able to continue to work, we found ourselves working even more
yeah.
because
I mean,
many of the social
that's the
structures.
interesting thing about remote work for so many people. I felt similarly. You know, and the having that flexibility particularly resonates for women.
And I think that having had that experience where boundaries blurred, time zones blurred, locations were irrelevant for a while, that helped me see that that wasn't the answer either. So the 24/7 remote experience, while it was amazing to go through and important, that was also not what my ideal state would be, as well as the 5-day work week rat race of commuting in and out of an office. So I think both of those models are now up in question. And what I've realized was that to take a step back and to slow down is essential because we are so reactive. We're wired to be agile, to respond, to turn on a dime, and that's great. But sometimes what it means is that we're responding with our muscle memory of what we know instead of what could be. And so this period of time for me has been a reexamination of how do I want to contribute? What are those things that I feel I can best deliver to have social impact, to reinforce areas where there are unmet needs, to bring design practice in a new way into organizations.
You also talk to me before we had this conversation about the opportunity during this pause to connect and rekindle relationships. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes. So during the first 2 quarters of this year, I was so amazed at the serendipity of reconnection. I have been meeting in a fairly regular cadence with 6 other women from a variety of backgrounds, academia, pharma, management consulting. Some of us had worked together in the past. And we have a standing meeting called Meeting of the Minds because we all feel that we want to do something different. We want to experiment. And we actually co-created a workshop proposal for the Nordics Design Research Conference that happened in Sweden earlier this month. Unfortunately, our proposal was not selected, but it was such an invigorating experience to
Oh,
think
wow.
how to create a new kind of workshop. So the idea was that we were going to unworkshop to bring a new way of looking at problem solving and idea generation where it isn't only human centered, because to solve some of the climate crisis issues, we can't be only human centered. We have to look at the broader ecosystem that includes microorganisms and other players. So it was a great exercise to say, well, we can come together, we can try things, and we're going to carry through some of those ideas, hopefully, into the future, and maybe find another forum to experiment.
That's really exciting. I mean, to have this mastermind group that you do, and I feel like I have that kind of relationship with some of our Quorum Initiative members as well. It just kind of opens up your mind to new possibilities, doesn't it? Just engaging in that kind of a think tank approach.
That's right. And the other serendipitous occurrence was that I reconnected with John Iwata, and he's a former IBM executive who has been an instrumental part of the new Yale program on stakeholder innovation and management. And he convened a new brief design conference with different design leaders at the Yale School of Management last March. So I was able to participate in that. And it's a time when we're looking at business and what it means to consider stakeholder innovation rather than simply shareholder value. So redefining some of those precepts that are guiding companies as we look at sustaining how we can bring value to society.
Wow. You had mentioned also that you've been kind of thinking about or exploring perhaps fractional engagements. And we've been hearing about the rise of the fractional chief financial officer, the fractional chief marketing officer. Tell me a little bit about that, because I think that's something that a lot of women are now that they've had this time during COVID to kind of think, take a break or pause and reconsider what their next looks like. The word fractional comes up a lot, but some people don't exactly know what it is and how to even start doing it.
I was given an example recently by an executive outplacement coach who had been working with a former CMO of a large multinational who had been really embracing this idea of a fractional portfolio of engagements. And it's just an interesting word because we don't often think about our work as a portfolio. And to think of someone with very extensive experience being able to tailor it and work with perhaps a startup that may not be able to support a full-time role. So how do you take your expertise and distill it and offer it into places where it can actually make a big difference, even at maybe 3 days a month? And so I really was attracted to that idea of leveraging the strengths and the skills and the experiences in a very choiceful and tailored way for places where it's needed, but maybe not as the conventional full-time executive role.
Right. And this kind of arrangement for many people provides them with the flexibility and a little bit more life balance to do other things.
Exactly. And like many of us, I feel I'm a poster child for the sandwich generation with an elderly mother with dementia who lives in another city.
I can relate to that. Yep.
And a teenage son who's facing his last couple of years of high school. And for me, it truly has been a gift to be able to support both of them in ways that I could not when I was working full time during this period.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I've had similar experience. My last layoff when I was still working in the corporate world, of course, initially it freaked me out, but then eventually I realized that what I really wanted to do was run my own public relations consultancy. And it got me back. If I was still in that position, I was sort of muddling along. But then when I was let go, it was like, oh, I actually can do this now.
Yes.
And it worked out for me. You speak about the whole identity issue. And from women who are passionate about their careers, which you are, I am too, it's you can feel a sense of being unmoored, disconnected from the culture and people that you've been so much a part of, in your case for 15 years. How have you, what have you done? What's your thought process been about kind of reestablishing what's core to your identity, kind of separate from work?
I'm going to refer back to the How Forum that I attended last October. it was really amazing because it actually took place the day after we all were notified about the coming dissolution of our organization.
God, what
And
timing.
so it was perfect timing. But I was able to hear Katrina Lempensky, who led a session on paradox of leadership. And she uttered some words that really stuck with me, and that is to look at distinguishing between fear-based values and truth-based values.
Mm.
And that resonated deeply with me because fear-based values are those stories that we tell ourselves about what we ought to be doing, what we really need to do because we're obliged to, or because everyone else is, or because we're afraid of what would happen if not.
Right. And it could also include imposter syndrome, right?
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. So really then separating out fear-based values from truth-based values, which are those deeper values that matter most to us and that are really independent of any one particular moment, but those deeply grounded values. And she quoted Joe Batten, who said that our value is the sum of our values. And I was thinking about, well, what are my values? And some of the ones that bubbled up starting last fall include creativity, harmony, family, health, and achievement. And I think another one is to allow for that unstructured time, because that is when unexpected things can occur, whether it's unstructured play or unstructured reflection, because I think that's what was so starkly different when suddenly I didn't have my Outlook back-to-back meeting agenda. I felt this impulse to fill up my calendar, but you have to avoid replacing the workday calendar with gratuitous things that make you feel that you have value, when actually it's just a model that is perhaps not appropriate to where you are right now. So allowing that space to look more deeply at things that aren't necessarily fully scripted and organized in order to allow for the unexpected, those juxtapositions that will occur through chance meetings and through actually taking time to look at something that isn't just on your to-do list.
I love that. It's really powerful. And I also find that some of my best ideas come when I'm not doing anything. Right? Because
That's
you're
right.
kind of carving out that space to be open to ideas. I think you had mentioned a book that might be a helpful resource for people about work identity.
Oh, yes. And the disclaimer is that I haven't read it yet, but I was just in DC, where I was lucky enough to be able to get together with two other Quorum Initiative members, Gitanjali Sakuja and Willow Darcy. And Willow told us about this book, which is by Erminia Ibarra, and it's titled Working Identity: A Spotlight on the Elephant in the Career Change Room.
Mm.
And so we were talking about the various things that we've been reflecting on as we look ahead. And that idea of self-identification and your value and status dependent on your work, that's something that we need to just carefully unpack, because it can lead to feelings of anxiety when suddenly that structure of the employer, in some cases, when that's gone, because it's hard to prepare for letting go of that secure and comforting affiliation with an organization that provides access and support and a sense of belonging. And what we have to realize is that all of those things also live within ourselves and within our communities that we have with former and future and current friends, family, colleagues.
Yeah, I know we've talked about how being so immersed in a full-time job um, can really be at expense of your paying attention to your personal life. And um, we both were at the How retreat a few weeks ago that the Quorum Initiative ran, and one of the many impactful sessions was led by Alan Sakon, who's a financial advisor, and she was in conversation with Charisma Williams of the ACLU, talking about how so many women are so focused on their careers that they often, well, first of all, they have just a lot of innate fears about financial conversations, just talking about money, because they've been conditioned not to talk about money. But also, I think we all get so caught up in the what we're doing every day at work that we forget about our, these important personal goals that we should be setting and focusing on as well. And now, when you have the time and space to do that, it's really enlightening.
I remember that session well. The whole idea of financial wellness and the fact that many of us put our work-related goals and objectives first. So how can we readjust and look strategically about at our own scenario planning, which includes financial planning? And so for me, the big aha was that I could actually be strategic in setting up new goals that had to do with things beyond uh, achieving my performance rating for a given year. So rethinking again how we can be empowered to understand more about systems that typically women have not been taught to understand for decades.
Yeah, I that was a very powerful thing, and I loved how it was positioned as financial wellness because it's part of the whole picture. Um, you are now, I think, also looking at some investing in your own personal and professional development as a result of having this gift of time. And we just did a poll uh, on for Quorum Initiative about how much or how little women actually invest in their own personal and professional development, and it's kind of astounding because the numbers are very low. And the reason is, I think, and I'd love to get your input, but the reason is that women just typically have so much else on their plate. Um, and just our society has put a lot of pressure on women to run a household, caregiving responsibilities. Certainly, if you're in the sandwich generation, you know what that's like. It can be all encompassing. And then, excelling at your job and climbing the corporate ladder, if that's important to you. Perhaps you're also serving on a corporate board, who knows, or starting a company. And so the idea of investing financially and emotionally into your own self-development gets waylaid and it gets sidelined.
I was very fortunate to have a number of different opportunities while at Johnson & Johnson to participate in leadership development. And actually the Aspen Institute First Movers Fellowship was one of those. And so I appreciate that the value of having that kind of concentrated time to focus on one's own development and growth. And so I have enrolled in an eCornell certificate program in diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it's an area that I've been very involved with over the years without necessarily having an OD degree. And so I just thought, well, why not just see what some of the latest thinking is? Because there have been many missteps, especially since 2020, when a lot of corporations started to jump on the bandwagon of diversity training. But we've seen a lot of the debate over whether that has been effective, of how to go about really being inclusive and adding the word belonging in some cases. So I thought that this would be the perfect moment to engage in a dialogue with others who are exploring what it actually means. So it's not just keywords and themes that are in the popular press, but to look at what are the implications to have a culturally relevant organization.
I think that's marvelous. I mean, and I think what you're saying is that you see the value in investing in this for yourself. It's, first of all, it's going to open up your mind to new things. You're going to meet new people. It's going to be a source of idea generation for you, and maybe even help you in determining what's next in your own career. I can't stress it enough how important it is, and to really see the value beyond the dollar sign. It's just enormous. I mean, I remember I went back to graduate school about 12 years ago. I got my graduate degree, so I did it much later in my life. And a lot of people said to me, "Why are you doing that? Do you really need that degree?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. I need it for up here. I need it for myself." And it just opened me up to so many other possibilities and opportunities. I really hope that women hear this and take another look at that, at professional and personal development, because it is almost priceless.
I agree. And it's so easy to put things off because of all of the demands on our time. But what I find is that if you don't add it to your calendar, it's not going to happen.
No.
The things that you try to fit in around the edges, they often get bumped or put on the back burner. And so by making a deliberate commitment, you're actually going to honor some of those things that we need to do for ourselves as well.
Somi, one of the things that we spoke about earlier is that when we have a break from a role that we've held for a long time, we tend to idealize what that role was like to us, that it was so perfect and it really had, like, it was the perfect package, had everything that in it that we love to do. What does this taking a pause, does it make you feel any differently about the role you held for so long?
I definitely idealized my role, my company. I loved every moment and had such amazing colleagues, learned so much. So I can look back now, though, and say, well, that was amazing. And I've benefited so much and hopefully was able to contribute a lot as well. But that now I'm in a new phase and I don't need to replicate, because I wouldn't have known what I was getting into. When I joined, I had no idea. And actually, both Johnson & Johnson and then my prior role at Ogilvy, I had not actually applied to roles. They had come to me. And so it's a new situation to be suddenly considering, okay, well, where do I want to go? Where might I help to shape something that may not exist? Because I don't think that I'll necessarily find my next role through a cold call application. I have read many job descriptions and it's very confusing to parse out what is this actually about, because so many things are shoehorned into job descriptions these days. So I want to take a step back and think more about, well, where might there be opportunities that I can help to shape, even if they don't yet exist.
That's great. I love that. I love how you're looking at this next. Really, you're being so pragmatic and thoughtful about it. And that is, again, goes back to having the gift of time. We've gotten some interesting comments and kudos and from people who are watching the broadcast today. Somebody is saying that she really loves what you shared about being conditioned and to respond on a dime when you're in a full-time role. But how that's good. I mean, you learn to be very quick and think on your feet, but it also means that you're acting, as you said, with muscle memory a lot of times, and not really, you don't always have the luxury of actually thinking through every scenario and, coming up with a different solution. You're just sort of putting out a fire.
And we used to say that we had to avoid rushing to execution. So
Yeah.
that was always a big pressure, was that we needed to deliver, to deliver, to deliver. But we needed to add that space so that we would properly translate the insight into the application of that insight in whatever the solution would be, and not just rush to deliver something, because then we will miss opportunities, because we will be basing that delivery
Totally.
on things that have existed before or that can be done quickly, not necessarily doing that deeper dive into discovery that finds new ways to finalize whatever that solution might be.
Yeah,
So
and being more strategic. You can't be that strategic if you're like, running around and working on adrenaline all the time. Somi, so I think this has been such a fantastic and rich conversation. What are some of the key takeaways that we can offer our viewers today when they're
I
in a time of a career pivot?
I have thought about this a bit since we first started to prepare for this conversation, and I have four. I don't know how succinct they are, but I think we've covered some of them just in our conversation. The first one is to connect, offer, and participate. Avoid isolation and find ways to rethink your agenda without filling it with gratuitous activities that mimic former workday schedules. It's the unexpected meetings and interactions that often lead to aha moments and opportunities.
Mm.
And a second one has to do with time and speed. Slow down, avoid gridlock. It takes an effort to build new muscles and commit time to personal priorities, which might include health, social interaction as we emerge from a pandemic, enrichment of many kinds, or unstructured play. And I think we actually have more control than before about when and how work happens. So we should take advantage of that and take breaks and mix it up. Third, reclaim the language of your skills and strengths. Avoid rote keywords and generic labels. And this is hard because we all know how LinkedIn is structured, and your job description that you're examining may or may not align with the skills on your profile, etc. But what is a skill? I think that that words have a lot of meaning, and we often assume they mean things that they might not. So be open-minded and craft your story to simplify and highlight what's unique about your experience. If you haven't been out there looking for a new role in a while, it can be scary, but really, you should appreciate the many things that you've accomplished and keep an open mind, because what you think you need to do might be very different from the reality.
Absolutely. Don't get stuck in what you did in the past. What you can do in the future can be something really fresh and exciting.
That's right. And then finally, remember what was most exciting and fulfilling about your best days. And for me, some of the things that were so energizing include collaboration, experimentation, and discovery. So that hard work of rolling up sleeves and tussling with people who may or may not agree, but that you're working together with a shared purpose. And when I remember those things, they actually took place in many different settings. So it was not a one size fits all. So trying to pull out, what is it that I really felt I was able to contribute? What was that situation? What was the environment? And how might I think about it in a new way?
That's terrific. Somi, I think we're going to leave it there. I hope you'll come back and we can continue this conversation and expand on it even more. Thank you so much for your time. For those of you who have been inspired, I hope you will consider becoming a Quorum Initiative member. So go to the website at quoruminitiative.com and check us out. We've got some phenomenal programs coming up and some more real honest conversations with women who've been there and want to really share their experiences. Have a great day.
Thank you, Julie. It's been a pleasure.